views and opinions expressed on the following program are those of the commentators, guests, and host. They do not explicitly or necessarily reflect nor represent the policy or the views held by Tobago Updates or this network. Tobago Updates or this network cannot be held accountable for all or any views expressed during this program.
Yes, so, all right. So, good evening and welcome to another edition, of course, of Vox Populi with yours truly, Barrington Skippy Thomas. This evening, I propose to discuss three issues. One, of course, is a very noble and good thing that I saw happening in the Tobago space. Two, the Integrity Commission letter et al. Three, of course, the lifting of the injunction. I actually didn't take a note of that. Let me just slip it in. The lifting of the injunction. I think that is two, yes. The lifting of the injunction. The Integrity Commission letter, I did mention that. And of course, the PDP meeting at Speyside last Sunday. So, you know what I say, let's get to work. Let's get to work. Now, my friends, yes, the TPP meeting at Speyside last Sunday. Thank you very much, producer. So, let's get to work. Now, it was the World Health Organization that adopted the phrase from another author that said, a society is judged by the way it treats its young people, treats its children, and its elderly citizens. I saw in the Tobago space, and I have some photos I have sent to the producer. I saw in the Tobago space the Secretary for Education, Technology, Innovativeness, but for all intents and purposes, the Secretary for Education. I saw her distributing, one, to her colleagues, and two, to children and teachers. I even saw her praying, in fact, with some students just before the SCE. And I found this to be a very noble and human thing. I was impressed, very impressed, to no ends about it. When I saw it, I said, we are indeed in a good place. We are indeed in a great place. We are going places in Tobago. Yes, I said we are going places in Tobago. And in fact, I formed the view then, as I am still convinced now, that it was a good, noble thing, and we are destined for greatness if we maintain that human approach to governance. I said initially that the World Health Organization have set that standard, and they have set the standard to say a society is going to be judged. You see, I tell you, I work with the best, you know, I am among the best in matters of producing, because I did not send those, I didn't have them, but they are up. Give the producer a round of applause wherever you are. So the World Health Organization have set that standard for the world, that you are going, as a society, you will be judged based on how you treat your children and elderly citizens. And this was a very human, touching moment for me. But I also want to say, much more than that, and much, much more than that, the Secretary of Education is not the author of this initiative. This initiative started with the Orville London regime, or perhaps beyond, but it have always been an entrenched THA initiative. Having said that it was always a THA initiative, and I'm properly advised, because I have done some work to confirm same, that the minority leader and area representative Duke, the leader of the PDP in this instance, they too have received packages. And what that means for me, especially since it is not a new initiative initiated by this administration, neither is it a new initiative initiated by this Secretary of Education, but what it indicates that I want to create a word. I remember when I was on Power 102, my co-host Richard Norrie, who is the CEO of a very fabulous financial institution now, used to say to me, Thomas, you keep making up your own words. You're not allowed to have your own dictionary when you're pronouncing it on public matters, you know. But I am going to create a new word again tonight. So that Tobago nanmity, it have underscored what it is to be Tobagonian, that Tobago-ness, that Tobago nanmity. And I said that with the background that the PNM may have given it only to the public schools. This secretary, of course, have included a number of the private students and private schools and so. But all in all, the minority leader got, Comrade Duke got. But all in all, it resounded to, it was a Tobago initiative to provide for all the SEA students in Tobago. And I think that is a noble act that was continued by this secretary. And it underscored another point for me. I would like to see, and I'm still saying it from this place and at this time, I would like to see such and much more initiatives of that Tobago nanmity. Because, my friends, we must show Port of Spain that we are not easily divided. In fact, I remember a mantra that was often pronounced by Orville London. When on the campaign trail, he would say, I am Tobagonian first and PNM after. But not this young groups of, well, let me not get derogatory. Not this young group of actors in the political scape of the PNM tribe. To the letter and without query, they carry out their Port of Spain instructions. They carry out their Port of Spain instructions. And I think this exercise and initiative by the Secretary of Education and colleagues in the Executive Council, I imagine, ought to be one where we must look at it and see what other divisions, that is what I meant to say, other divisions ought to look at it and see what initiatives they can come up with on the platform of Tobago nanmity. I think it was noble, it was worthy, and it ought to be commended. On the issue of the injunction, I don't want to start before I start. I want to say this about the issue of the injunction. I heard it pronounced politically that the injunction will be lifted, and it has been lifted. Now, maybe it is important for me to say to you, what are the rudiments of an injunction? And an injunction is a remedy in common law where you approach the court and you ask the court to allow the status quo to remain until I bring my substantive position for you to hear, and upon hearing my substantive position, you will make a determination on the status quo. I don't know if I was clear enough, but I really did try to leave out all the legal jargons and so that would be attached to it. In other words, you ask the court to let the situation remain as it is and hear me at another time. Hear me at another time. And if you are satisfied after hearing me at another time, then the order I seek to change the situation or leave it as it is, in fact, that is, and leave it as it is would be ordering a permanent injunction. And that was the case. So some parties in the area down there went to the court and they said to the court, we have something for you to hear about that road. But until you hear it, the road works must not continue. So we ask you to injunct it, to stop it from continuing until you hear us, until you make some determination on what we ask you to hear. So it's an interim, it is an interim remedy, right? Having been an interim remedy, it is not set in stone. So the party against whom such interim remedy was sought can go back to the court and ask the court to discharge the remedy of the injunction. Some of the hurdles that must be crossed in seeking an injunction, it's not really a high hurdle, but it's definitely not a low hurdle. So like in the case of judicial review, the hurdles are very low. In the case of an injunction, the hurdles are not insurmountable. So one of the things the court tell you when they're giving you an injunction, they're telling you, let me give you a good example. And I always make the point, and I wish to emphasize the point tonight. Courthouse, I have a lawyer partner. His name is, well, we're not as close as we were many moons ago, but his name is Jagdev Singh. And Jags always had a thing he used to say. Look, we liming, we going out, or sometimes he quarreling, or sometimes he working, and he would say, Skippy, go and tell them people I say, courthouse don't close. And that is a valid point. Courthouse don't close. Because a judge, there's always something known as the emergency judge, right? And let me tell you how you could invoke. So at midnight, no, before I get to that, if you want to invoke the powers of the emergency judge, if you go to a lawyer, it is normally sent round, just 1 minute. Yeah. So it is, that was the phone. Remember, I always use the phone to monitor whether I'm on and so. So if you're a lawyer, there's a memo, a note that will go around informing who is the emergency registrar with their mobile number and who is the emergency judge. And so if at midnight you are being evicted, or at midnight you want the police not to do something, because that's what an injunction is. So, or a writ of mandamus commands you to do something, but an injunction prevents you from doing something, right? So you want an order, so you won't get a writ of mandamus will not necessitate an emergency hearing. Seeking an injunction with a certificate of urgency to the court will grant you that emergency hearing. So you could actually walk up to the courthouse step and the security guard there will know what number they have to call to allow you that emergency hearing. Or you just call a lawyer and the lawyer know which number they have to call and you get an emergency hearing, and that emergency hearing could be done by telephone. the judge listening over the phone, and they grant the injunction. Straightforward, simple, and sometimes judges, depending on the hour and so at night waiting. But you remember, as they have their mechanism in place to treat with this emergency, so they'll always be able to email, to fax, and so. But there are instances when it's sufficient, where judges, not only in this jurisdiction, but in the Commonwealth jurisdiction, have called other parties or other lawyers or send WhatsApp messages or text messages to simply say, or fax messages to simply say, I am Judge A and my interim decision is this. So this injunction was sought on the road. But one of the things in an interim injunction order is that the judge also tells you, we're going to maintain the status quo, but I would hear you tomorrow in daylight because it's an emergency. So we leave it as it is for now, but I'll hear you, and they give a date on which they will hear you urgently and so. And if it has to be discharged because the other party filed what is known as a notice of application to have the injunction discharged, then if the injunction has to be discharged, the person who sought the injunction would have a terrible cost to pay, because all of that is in the order. That we'll give you this, maintain the status quo because it's an emergency, but we will hear the substantive issue. Or before that, we may hear a notice of application to discharge the injunction. But if the notice of application to discharge the injunction or the substantive issue are so meritorious that we ought to discharge the injunction, then you ought to know you would bear the cost for everything you stop. So if you stop somebody selling and the injunction is discharged, you have to pay them damages for what they lost and that sort of thing. So injunctions are not cast in stone. And the rationale for granting or discharging injunctions is a simple calculation in law where the judicial officer has to decide upon hearing the parties. He has to decide. And that is the other thing. You could get an injunction ex parte, meaning that is hearing one side only. But you could also get an injunction the discharge of an injunction must be intra-party, hearing all sides. So after hearing all sides, the judge then would have, the judicial officer will then have to balance where the detriment of inconvenience lies. So in the Tobago space and in specificity to this roadworks, the inconvenience and where it lies is what the judge had to calculate. There is no judgment per se, save and except a notice of application and an order. And the order of the court clearly is that the inconvenience lies with the THA. They have responsibility when you construe the Highway Act with the delegated functions of the duties, constitutional duties of the THA. So when you construe or you read purposively the Highway Act and you read it purposively to interpret it according to the constitutional remit, albeit delegated, of the THA, then the inconvenience then lies with the THA. And the THA inconvenience, of course, is to deliver goods and services. And so on that basis, the injunction was certainly discharged. All right? So I think I've covered that as well. Now, I want to go now to a more unpopular area. May I ask at this moment, may I ask the producer to put up some press releases issued by the PNM for me, please? I will try to read them quickly, but from the screen. Right, so I can't read it from the screen. One of the press releases were I'll have to read it from the phone, but I do have my glasses. What? But one of the press releases was related, of course, to the Integrity Commission letter. And so, of course, after Egg and so fell on their face, they put out this press release purporting that their hands are clean and, they weren't caught at all in engaging in malafides and malapraxis. Our hands are clean, so they put out this press release. They put out another press release saying that they intend to and or have always been, but they respect the rule of law, and so I think, yes, they respect the rule of law. But it is this press release they put out indicating that they respect the rule of law that caused me to realize these people, either they do not know what they're talking about, clearly they don't have a clue about what the rule of law is. It sounds to them like a cliche phrase. And so after being caught in malafides and malapraxis, eggs fell on their face, and as a result of that, they have decided then to think that some press releases with fancy words clearly they do not understand, fancy words, but using terms and so they have no clue about, could save them the embarrassment of the eggs that fell in their faces. I'll tell you what I mean about that. And I want us to deal singularly and specifically with their press release that say they subscribe to the rule of law. You know, they put, because the injunction was lifted, right? The injunction was discharged. And as a result of the injunction being discharged, after they applauded the first injunction and applauded by saying things equivalent to, quote, we tell lawyers so, they're bad, they don't follow law, they're doing what they want. Until then, this had a whole press conference last Sunday. I listened to it. They don't follow the rule of law. The court talk, the court chastise them. They have to deal with the courthouse. And there was this big boast by Dennis and the PNM about this injunction and so on. And so, like chicken licking, on a Sunday, he called a press conference to say, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. You like chicken licking? The sky is falling. The courthouse stopped the road and so on. That is what they were doing. Of course, after becoming terribly embarrassed, they put out a press release now saying they didn't come back in person. No, they put out a press release and say, well, we respect the rule of law. But when I saw the press release saying we respect the rule of law, I realized that these people are completely clueless. If not for anything, for certainly the rule of law. I wish to speak to you briefly now about the rule of law. And after I speak to you about the rule of law, then I invite you in your own time, I invite you to decide, right? I invite you to decide whether or not you think that this press release they put out speaking about the rule of law makes any sense to you whatsoever. So let me tell you about the rule of law. And I'll invite, I see them on my page, and they always here, they always on the show, and I see them, but right now, I suffering from fed upness. Yeah, that's the truth right now. I am so suffering from fed upness that you would find that the energy to respond to a lot of these people is kind of tough. I see things they write about me. I do not respond to them. I have no intention of responding to them either for a number of reasons, but I just won't be responding to them. So I saw the press release and they say, well, we respect the rule of law. And then that is when I realized that they are as clueless as Alice in Wonderland. So let me tell you about the rule of law. You read their press release, and you tell me after reading their press release and hearing me telling you about the rule of law, if that press release made any sense, or if it was only a desperate attempt to wipe eggs off their faces. So the rule of law is widely accepted to be a critical part of an effective constitution. Its principal function is to constrain governments and its action. It is a topic that has been subject to a significant amount of academic debate. So this module aims to summarize. I'm hoping after speaking to you, I could summarize a number of the main academic arguments on this subject, right? So there's a significant disagreement initially on how to define the rule of law. While some scholars have suggested that it should be content-free, dealing only with the form of law and procedural matters, others have suggested it should be a content-full and should contain substantive element of laws which should be required to comply with fundamental rights. So the rule of law has been referred to as a wrapper that is placed around a bundle of constitutional principles. At one extreme, the rule of law is merely a rhetorical device or a political philosophy, and its content is unimportant. That is a content-free view. At the other extreme, this is the content-rich view, that the rule of law determines the validity of law, and so laws that conflict with its principles are invalid. In the United Kingdom, the rule of law in two ways. Firstly, that courts should interpret legislation in a way to give effect to the rule of law, and secondly, that the rule of law determines the validity of government action and some legislation. This is how the rule of law functions, but opinions varies on what the concept known as the rule of law means. Now, the history of the rule of law is simply no more or no less than this. In the late Roman period, the view was established that royalty was above the law and subject only to the law of God and not to other men. The path to the institutionalism of the rule of law advanced and then at times were weakened. But the Magna Carta in 1215 enshrined the principle that the king was not above the law. Barons demanded that King John accept the charter after a period of domestic unrest due to the king's focus on foreign war and his raising of taxes to finance the war with France. The final version of the Magna Carta provides that, 1, no bailiff should prosecute without producing witnessing evidence. Lawful imprisonment or exile requires judgment by one's peers in accordance with the law of the land. The right of or justice cannot be denied or delayed. Knowledge of the law must exist before it can be enforced. Restorative justice should exist where one's land or liberties are removed without a legal sentence of one's peers. It's unjust and illegal that the king had imposed taxes on people, and because he did that illegally and unjustly, those should be repaid. No one is above the law, including the clergy or laity, as far as it pertains to them. In Prohibitions, Delroy 1607, published in 1656, Sir Edward Coke asserted that the king could not act as a judge using his own reason to reach decision, but should be tried by judges who apply the law to the facts. Petition of Right 1628 was a petition from the barons to the king to remind him of the principles of the rule of law established in the Magna Carta. The Petition of Right extended the rule of law and due process to encompass some implied terms of the Magna Carta. The principles encompassed within the Petition of Rights include that no free man should be imprisoned or removed of his liberties without appropriate judgment by his peers without due process of law. No man should be ejected from his land, imprisoned, or disinherited without being brought to answer by due process of law. Despite these principles, many people had been brought before the king and imprisoned without being brought before the justices. These individuals were just detained at the king's command and returned several times to prison without being charged. No individual should be sentenced to death without being judged according to the principles of the Magna Carta and the law of the land. The king has imposed martial law and put individuals to death without due process, and the Magna Carta found that all those sovereign actions were unlawful. The right of habeas corpus is an essential feature of the rule of law and is not explicitly mentioned in the Magna Carta, but subject to much future legislation. It matured in legal terms in the Petition of Right. It requires a detainee to be brought before the court, so legality of their detention can be determined, and if not, the prisoner must be released. Right? So far in all of that, just so far, you seen anything there related to Ansel Dennis, the nonsense and the press release? No, you tell me, you see anything there related to the nonsense and the press release? The Habeas Corpus Act specifically legislated for the fact that a detainee was entitled to be brought before a court to subject to his or her detention to decide whether the judicial process was too long and hence whether or not there was some legal scrutiny. Those are what the rule of law is concerned about, right? The Bill of Rights of 1689 stated that law could not be made, repealed, or suspended without the will of Parliament. The Crown could not manipulate the court system, and subjects were now able to bring an action against the monarch. And the monarch and the courts could not subvert the requirements of habeas corpus. Those are the issues the rule of law are concerned about. And because it was so, as I told you, it's because it was so confusing. So let me hasten to the end of this now. Because it was that, you see how confusing it could be, how the habeas corpus and the Magna Carta and all its principles and so, right? And so because of that, Lord Bingham had subsequently, and Lord Bingham was a member of the House of Lords, and Lord Bingham have subsequently defined 8 sub-rules, what is known as the 8 sub-rules, which are now in effect, the guidelines for the rule of law, and these are what they are. 1, so laws should be accessible, clear, and predictable. You tell me, Trinidad and especially Tobago, how is this related to Dennis, their press release after they made their mischief and egg fell in their face, and through embarrassment, they wrote that 2-page, well, let me conduct myself better than that. They wrote that 2-page garble and say, well, they subscribe to the rule of law. The other one, 2, 1, questions of legal rights and liability should be decided by application of the law. 2, the law of the land should apply equally to all, except when objective difference requires differentiation. 3, public officials should exercise their powers in good faith and not exceed their powers. 4, the law must protect fundamental rights. 5, a method should be provided at reasonable cost to resolve civil disputes. 6, adjudicative procedures must be provided by this. Adjudicative procedures provided by the state should be fair. 7, the rule of law requires the state to comply with its obligation in international law. And 8, of course, laws should be accessible, clear, and predictable. So clear was Lord Bingham in these 8 sub-rules that define the rule of law, that the European Commission on Democracy adopted this approach. So this is the established approach in law to what is known as the rule of law. I mean, of course, there was Joseph Raz, who in his writing in the Law Quarterly Review, he said on the rule of law and its virtue. Now, Raz argues that the rule of law should only be about the form and procedures by which law is created. There is no content for the rules prescribed within this view. Raz offered a number of principles for the rule of law. That one, all laws should be prospective, open, and clear. Law should not be subject to constant change. General and clear rules should be applied to the creation of laws. The judiciary should be independent. Decision making by public officials should follow principles of procedural fairness. The court should have review powers over decisions. Court should be easily accessible. Crime prevention agencies should not have discretion to pervert the law. Raz argues that the rule of law is a negative concept which is merely designed to minimize the harm to freedom and dignity which the law may create in the pursuance of its own goals, right? So I want you to look at Dennis's, the PNM's rather, press release, and you would realize it was nothing, it has nothing to do with the rule of law. So some ignoramus wrote that. Could very well be Leroy George, wrote that for them. And they put that out, thinking that because they use a fancy term as the caption, which has nothing to do with their press release at all, would allow us to forget and forgive the malfidés that they attempted to engage in, the PNM that is, I'm not naming an individual, the PNM that is, hoping that we will forget the malfidés and malpraxis that they have engaged in to create couture and bacchanalia and all that sort of thing in the Tobago space in an effort to aid them with their political fortunes. So, you know what they did there in layman terms? They at the PNM now in Tobago, and that press release nonsense after their mischief, their tirade, and now their feeble attempt to wipe eggs off their faces, can be likened to a group of friends going to the beach. A group of friends going to the beach, but they bounced down an old woman on a back road. And when they were about to drive off, some hunters came out the bush. 50 hunters came out the bush and caught them. So they pretend now that they put in the towel and the beach ball below the old lady's head to keep her up, you know, for circulation and so. And then they take in the ice out the cooler, the drinks, to put it on the damaged parts or perhaps a leg and so. So they're pretending now that, no, we wasn't going to leave her. It was an accident. We only parking the car on the side to come out and attend to her. That is only they started doing that because they got caught. They got caught. And the people of Tobago and the next group of people to return to the polls in any occasion and in the future in Tobago must be reminded of this guttural political strategy of the PNM in Tobago. They must not get away with it. They must not get away with it. Right. So I think I've dealt with that. I want to turn now to something that is important to me. Insofar that every minute somebody's taking snapshots of Tobago Charles Augustine. Is that the name? Tobago Augustine Charles or Tobago Charles Augustine. I'm sure most of you might be familiar with the page I'm talking about. I am getting into no tit for tat with none of them. Me, I getting into no tit for tat with none of them. But I want to say to whoever Tobago Augustine Charles is and one Leroy George, I want to say to them that there must be a tree somewhere in Trinidad and Tobago that is responsible for reproducing the oxygen that the both of you are using. Go and find that tree and apologize to it. Having said that, let me now say this. Having said that, let me now say this. I had, as I said, no intention of it, but let me just make this final and only statement on this nonsense now. The obscurantists that believed the latest saga of misinformation and couture disseminated by the PNM through its leadership, spokespersons, and in particular, its Mendakem, a tetram faceless Facebook blogger, pun intended, in an effort to succinctly complete the point I was making last Wednesday concerning Lettergate, on so far as to the extent of my name being involved. Let me say the following. My original thoughts were just to treat them as it was treated as a them and it, as a boring joke, and whine on them, as I attempted to do last week with my stiff waist whine. But I've chosen to be categorical and state for the record the following. 1. I wrote no letter purporting it to be from the Integrity Commission. I did, however, see the letter like most persons. I took the position in primo aspectu that qui elegat probare, which simply means he who alleges must prove. That was my position on it. And I took that position for the simple and singular reason that I myself, as in this case, knows what it is to be responding to allegations that very often are the creative works of jinns. It is my considered view that I was attached to that nonsense because sometime before I did state that a secretary has some questions to answer, and those questions were preferred by the Integrity Commission. When I said that, and I have in my possession that letter, and I have in my possession this, what purports to be the secretary's response and so. But when I said that, and I did not reproduce it, and if I had it with me that night, I think I may have been in Tobago doing the show. I think I may have done the show in Tobago. And if I had it with me, perhaps I may have produced it on the both letters on there. I chose not to, as I still have those letters, but I chose the both letters. But I chose not to because, as I think I made a point early on, I know what it is to wake up and hear your name calling in something again. So I say, you see me? Skippy, drop that ball. And it is for that reason I did not pursue that any further, notwithstanding having it. But I want to say categorically, I don't know anything about that letter, but I know about a letter sent to a secretary by the Integrity Commission, and I know about the secretary's response. So when I said that it meant no more or less than this, these were the allegations contained in the letter of which I know about. That a former chairman, and these are the questions that the Integrity Commission had put to the secretary. I have paraphrased it to avoid mentioning or naming the secretary. A former chairman of a THA company, by whatever alias it is now known as, described, has made some very serious allegation of the secretary, and it have attracted significant seriousness by the commission to the extent the secretary involved had to retain counsel to respond to the allegations put to the secretary by the commission. Some of the allegations put to the secretary include, but are not limited to: one, that the secretary demanded that the former chairman expend millions of dollars in credit to a company, and there was a figure. I'm choosing not to say the figure to minimize any innuendo or suggestion as to who that secretary may be. That secretary demanded that the former chairman expend millions of dollars in credit to a company without first performing due diligence in respect of same. These are not my allegations. These are what the Integrity Commission had put to the secretary. The said company was one of the ill-equipped companies to which the secretary awarded a contract worth scores of millions of dollars. Two, the Integrity Commission further put that the secretary sought to dictate the companies through which the THA would transact business in the lucrative Guyana market. In particular, that the secretary demanded that the THA company sell to Guyana through its chosen middlemen. And by chosen middlemen, the allegation is that the secretary had some middlemen. Through, that is what I'm saying, it's meaning the secretary. Through its chosen middlemen, although the former chairman already interacted with companies which were referred to the THA company directly by the relevant ministers in Guyana. In at least one instance, the company was one of those obscure entities which mysteriously won contracts for incongruent contracts with irregular bidding processes. The secretary proposed they put further that the secretary proposed a strategic partnership with a dubious partner at a cost of $120 million, and upon the analysis of the former chairman, the partnership was deemed not to be in the best interest of the THA company. The secretary sought to punish the former chairman for same. That is another question they put to the secretary. The other question is, by virtue of the secretary's action and in an attempt to punish the chairman, the secretary caused Guyanese contracts which had an estimated total value of $2 million not to be awarded to the THA company, which would in turn negatively affect the delivery of the necessary production levels, as well as deprive the THA and Treasury of funds that should have been received from sale. I have taken a very neutral position in this matter for the singular reason that qui allegat probare debit, that is to say, he who alleges must prove. It is my considered view that these are serious, albeit allegation, and it is for the Integrity Commission, yes, the same compromised less Integrity Commission, to investigate and make its findings public. These are my final, well, except to save and except to say, those were the allegations that the Integrity Commission, via letter dated July 25th, 2023 and November 20th, 2023 to the secretary. That is what I know about. Any other thing concocted by the PNM, Tobago, Charles Augustine, or Franca, whoever Franca is, they are now free to say and do what they want. I have said my final piece on this, and I intend to say no more. But right, so I want us now to turn to the issue of the TPP's political meeting in Speyside last Sunday. Now, praise God, I'm doing this show home, eh? Praise God, I am doing this show home. But them old people have a thing that they say. Because if I wasn't doing it home, I might have had to be in Tobago and telling vexed people, well, when I leave here, I know where I'm going. Well, I don't have to go nowhere because I'm here already. So, at home. And I intend to speak candidly on that political meeting and to express my thoughts honestly on that said meeting. Now, I can't chastise the meeting for starting late at all because I have no moral authority on saying to anybody, you start late. So let me get that out the way. I can't say nothing about starting late because I have no moral authority to do so. So I don't have a good record of punctuality myself. And sometimes several circumstances cause that. But the meeting, so no, I have no moral authority to talk about the lateness of the meeting, so I will not be doing that. Except to say, save and except to say, that while I might be I don't have a good record of punctuality, but I could also say that I'm not vying for public office, and I'm not vying to manage the THA. So certainly, those who are vying to do same must take note that punctuality, when you're vying for public office, punctuality is a friend because it lends to the consideration process of the voters, right? Now what? The chairman may have misunderstood his role. The chairman was giving speeches, declaring his political ambitions. The chairman, I'm talking about, the chairman was giving speeches, declaring his political ambitions and making declarations and so. And I said to myself, when I listened to the chairman, I said to myself, Lordy, Miss Claudie, you can't make pops. A chairman of a political meeting must confine themselves to introducing the speakers, attending upon and only upon housekeeping matters, and may make announcements as required. Say no more about that. Then I think it's a non-issue with, I think Orlando Kerr, I think his delivery was a good one. But for choreography, I'll have to minus marks, not for the fact that he said PDP. A slip of the tongue is not a fault of the man. But in hindsight, he should consider the viciousness of the politics. And when considering the viciousness of the politics, one would understand that surgical precision, whether it be mentally or orally, is a skill set for political platforms in the viciousness called politics. I remind him with good faith that politics is not Politics is not a bishop's tea party. It is the civilized substitute for war. Right? So I just remind him, and I say that in very good faith. Nonetheless, he did raise a point that I think is a valid point. As a teacher himself, I suspect a parent and so, but certainly a community leader. And I was wondering if I'm the only person who had concerns about the Prime Minister's conduct in his public offerings and utterance. Now, this is the only Prime Minister. I'm just trying to, rehash a number of the things that are walking through my mind. This is the only Prime Minister known to us here in this country. But I don't know a lot of you. But watching the news was part of my rigid curriculum. You all can't go and watch the news, and you have to sit down there and listen to Dominic Kali-Prasad and Jones P. Madeira and Bobby Thomas and all these news presenters. And then you have to, although parents watching the news, grandparents watching the news, when the news done, you have to explain to them what the news was about. As I grow old, I understood the value of that. But this is the only Prime Minister we have, and they say you watch the news, so you get to hear the Prime Ministers, the leaders of the nations and so. This is the only Prime Minister now, when he's on television, you have to either mute it, turn it off, or ask your children to go to their room because you're not sure what would come out of his mouth. So I think Kerr's deposition on the platform was good, except again, I say to him, he didn't solicit the advice, but I'm not advising anybody individually or collectively. I am sharing my thoughts on the production presented. I think he was good, except to say the sharpness of mind, mentally and orally, when you're on a platform in this vicious battlefield of politics, is important. And your choreography is what is going to allow you to make sense, or none of what you say would be regarded as being sensible. Putting on that song, I think it's something about lie. I can't remember if it was Teacher Percy say they tell a lie, or if it was Max, one of these guys. They damn lie, they lie, they lie. But whatever his song, it was a song making a point about lie. And right after he made a very valid point, the song came on. And he was dancing to the song. And I asked myself, is he aware that he may have just kicked down his bucket of milk? Until after the song, then he made the point. And for the purpose of choreography, that song ought to have been played after your introduction to the new point you wish to make. I think they were valid points, but certainly not before the point in that vacuum where it was, right? So that's what I have to say about that. Then, of course, after him, Terence Baines was spectacular. As usual, Terence Baines was spectacular, and I suspect experience would have contributed to that. So Terence Baines was, and then of course, Whitey. Well, let me tell you something. Whitey was excellent considering the circumstances on a platform. Whitey was excellent. Why I said that? Whitey's contribution on the platform can and must be likened to an experienced politician who is serious about the people that support him and the people he has to serve. Now, don't miss the point I made there. He's prepared to have the backs of those that support him to cause him to enjoy the office he enjoys while serving wider, even outside them. But he's not prepared to sacrifice those that support him and assist him to office to appear to be serving all. And when I heard him, I said, well, that is a politician. That, for the sake of the discussion, and when I heard him, I said, that is man. That is man. Well, of course, Whitey have never been known to be any charismatic platform speaker. Whitey is a technocrat. That is just the truth. Whitey's life is background is finance. He's about crunching numbers. He's about, what they call he's without emotions in these matters. He look at the numbers. 1 and 1 is 2. It can't be any. He's the kind of person that see 1 and 1 is 2 in any language, and so people with scientific minds like Whitey will never have flair on a platform. So you don't look for flair from them. You listen to them for the soundness of their delivery. And I want to say, Whitey stood out there as a giant of a politician that Sunday. The girl, a man could call a woman girl, but for respect, I'll simply say Miss Seconds. She too seemed to be a technocrat, not with much flair, and charisma and so for platforms. But I say to you, madam, wherever you may be, and I say to you, those of you like me who had to listen to the thing, I say that Miss Seconds was, I don't know her from the political arena for any lengthy period and so, but I'm sure in my mind that she has a lot of value to offer to her party, having heard her last Sunday, and I think she rolled out the perspective, the why we must, the why you should, the why you must get involved, the why it must be done, the how it must be done, and I think she was excellent. And if it was for me to suggest for her a role in the organization, I certainly would have suggested that she vie to be the party's Secretary General. Because she reminded me of deceased Fazal Karim. In fact, we had a joke in the Rienzi complex where we used to say to each other, we knew when the old Basdio Pandey, may his soul rest in peace also, wanted to tell us no. We know when Pandey's answer was no. When Pandey's answer was yes, he would tell you, no, just go and talk to Glenn and Skippy about that, and them fellas will fix all up with that. So you know when Pandey's answer was yes. When the answer was yes, go and talk to Glenn and Skippy. But we also knew when his answer was no. When his answer was no, is go and talk to Fazal. Say, no, go and check Faz. Because Fazal was not with many emotions. He was clinical in his thought process. And like Whitey and Miss Second, he had a scientific approach to the politics. Now, you can't have a party with too much people like that, eh? Can't have a party with too much people like that. There must be some charisma and so. If not, if you have a party, if all the upper echelon of your party is made up of people with scientific minds and calculated approaches, then you might as well form a chess club. But a political party can't be made up with too much of those stiff people, eh? I think, yeah. So, right. You might as well form a chess club. And then, of course, there was young Dwayne Nurse, is his name. I don't know Dwayne Nurse. I've never met Dwayne Nurse. I'm told he's William Nurse's son. I don't know if that is correct either. I'm just told that. I know William Nurse. I've met William Nurse, and William Nurse is my friend. And William Nurse is my friend. And I want to say this, and I'm saying this, it's critical, but I'm saying it with good faith. No, I have no copy. I'm trying to do it from memory, and you also distracted me. I'm doing it from memory. If Dwayne Nurse have been asked by the party to attract the youthful population of voters or the youthful population in Tobago generally to be a part of the politics, then after listening to him, he may be able to attract a few of his friends And if he's in a church group, a few from his Sunday school or his Sabbath school. I don't see that speech reaching out or resonating with the youthful population required to form sufficient numbers. For politics is a numbers game. Required to form sufficient numbers. And I suspect the strategy may have been use him because he's young, but his language to the young people was ineffective. He came across aloof. And I don't want to say ignorant, but I don't think he's an ignorant person if I listen to him on mornings and so. And I think he's actually a very, very, very intellectual giant. I think he's academically strong, but he came across aloof. He came across as if he was sent to speak to a few of his friends rather than the wider Tobago population of youths. Most of those youths, some are on the blocks, but they have interest in politics because they are of the opinion, and in the era where politics clearly and certainly has a determination upon their lives, right? Upon their lives. Coach Charles was giving me a drop from Lambo to Blue Gardena. We had an NAR meeting up there. He was passing with his car. He had one of these. It's a wagon. I think it was a grey or white. I can't remember. But he had a wagon. And I was on the highway getting to Blue Gardena. And he stopped. And he told me, don't drop out the politics, you know. Don't drop out the politics, you know. Politics determine how you eat, sleep, and drink, and live. He told me that. And for the purpose of attracting young people, I think young Dwayne Nurse's contribution on the platform was lackluster. If it was required to inspire, it flopped. And I suspect most of the young people after hearing him, not a drum was heard, not a funeral note. It may have been like the funeral of Sir John Moore. I'm not saying he should not be the youth speaker. That is not my place at all. But insofar as you all kept that meeting for the public to hear it, and I am involved in public commentary, those are my thoughts. That he sounded, appeared, came across, and delivered too aloof. And it is my view that after listening to him, he have resonated with, well, I shouldn't say no young person, but certainly not the majority that would be required for the numbers. Politics is a numbers game. Mr. Nurse will do well. He will do well to reconsider his approach. He will do well to reconsider his approach in soliciting and inviting youthful participation to the TPP. Because let me tell you something. Politics is about compare and contrast. So the young persons in the TPP had to listen to Mr. Nurse and treatment for them to come forward and join the party. But the PNM youth weapons for their weapon, political weapon that is, for the young people is Foster Cummings. And when you listen to Foster Cummings, when I was a youth, after listening to Dwayne Nurse and Foster Cummings, and don't think for 1 minute that the PNM would not engage Foster Cummings when they're ready to mobilize the young people. Because, and if I have to listen to the both of them, I'll go that direction. I'll go in that direction. Quite frankly, Watson Duke is an old man to Dwayne Nurse. And even Watson Duke knows how to attract the youthful population of voters. So Mr. Nurse, young Mr. Nurse, your political entreatment for the young people of the party, on the last occasion it flopped. This is fair criticism. I urge you to do an introspection, perhaps widen your network of young people, surround yourself with a committee of young people from all walks of life, So in other words, don't be singular in your approach. Collaborate with as much as, but certainly young people from all walks of life, and listen to collective views, and then you could be the singular orator to distribute the views, but as has been collected by the broader collective thing, because I suspect those were your thoughts, and you need to step up your game and your approach. And then, of course, we come now to the political leader. I'm not working in the THA. By all intent and purposes, I'm unlikely to work in the THA. So I could say what I want. Nobody can tell me, well, I'm not giving you the work or taking away the work. So I could say what I want. And in addition to announcing that he expects the injunction to be lifted, he made the point about the elections and so, and of course that he encouraged wide and all participation. He had announced that there's a suspension of paying the fees for membership, and so get your membership form. And I want to say this, I listened to it with a very critical but open mind. Very critical but open mind. But I see it's 9:18. I want to hasten to my conclusion for tonight's show. But I listened to it with a very critical but open mind. And there was some contradiction of sorts as far as I'm concerned. So you can't boast about the democracy of your party. Invite others and so, no, come, we're democratic, we want everybody involved. Whatever party you were involved, and say, no, we invite you, come, get a form, let us do this together. And that sounded great. But you know what the contradiction was? With the other side of your mouth, you said, okay, let me just put it this way. For the sake of democracy and this very democratic party that you're selling, it would have been better to say who were the officialdom that have taken the decision to suspend the waiving of the fees for the membership form. Because after listening to you, it sounded like a unilateral position. And they both will not weigh 16 ounces to each other. So you can't preach democracy and then sound unilateral. But outside of that, he made a declaration about the injunction being lifted. That was imposing confidence in the island. It have happened, and so that has the ability to muster and mobilize confidence among the people of Tobago. And he's vindicated, of course, what had happened, so that is a plus. The invitation to come and join the party, and so I don't think people will take that seriously at all. Because there's a point I want to make, and so when I'm making that point, I'll be able to clear up why I'm saying this. I think people see the party, the TPP party, as an aloof, big shot group of people. That is what they tell me. I listen to them every day. I want to be a fly on the wall to see what the responses are to the average man feeling comfortable enough to walk off the street with that degree of comfort and confidence to go and get a form to be a member of the party. And more than that, raising their hand and saying, well, you know what, I think I want to contest up insofar as the leader, the interim leader, has made the invitation, I want to contest the election. No, I think the people see the party as being too aloof. They tell me, I am observing, and so far I have very little evidence to disagree with them, that you all were nice and down to earth while you were campaigning, but they don't think that you all are nice and down to earth anymore. They think that you are aloof, and they think that you rode on their backs to get into office. That is what they tell me. I see very little evidence to disagree with them. I was concerned about the numbers, but for whatever it's worth, I was very concerned about the numbers when I saw it. But for whatever it's worth, I don't know, because I don't know if crowds at political party mean support anymore with this new introduction of the virtual apparatuses, and I don't know. And when you look at the and when you look at the crowd, they would come from a different era when attending meetings was the thing. So you have that merge, that mix, that merge. There needs to be a merge now of those who will just kind of like listen to you on their phone, and the next thing to it, these young people, and when you're campaigning for politics and so, they don't want to hear too much, they just want to hear what you're doing for me, So if you're making general points, that's okay, well, they're doing that for me, and they're not listening to the rest of the meeting. And so that is how the virtual spaces work. So the numbers wasn't a big issue to me, but I took note. That it would have been better to see, I took note to say that it would have been better to see much more blue, right? So outside of that, again, the chief secretary is just that. He's charismatic, right? He's charismatic. I really admire the position he took. He went into his own electoral district, and while in his electoral district, he highlighted some things he was able to achieve. And of course, and I like that. That was good politics. As the boss, he announced some things that he expects to happen in the future. And when I said I smiled, I said, well, this fella understands his politics well. And all in all, that was the meeting. But this is what I saw the meeting, and I tried to reconcile it with it. I was really hoping to hear from the platform. I think the closest person that came to it or treat with the issue was Secretary Whitey. But before I say that, well, then again, I don't know the party works. I don't know what the structure is and so. But I would advise the TPP, when you're having party events, your stage and faces must be made up of the party officers. Insofar that a secretary or a member of the legislature, whether it be in the parliament or the THA, may be on the party executive, fine. If you invite one of the secretaries or ministers or MPs or representatives to make a specific contribution on a specific subject matter, fine. But you don't lump your governing executive on the stage for a party event. Time is running out, and I don't want, but I would explain that perhaps with another opportunity at some time. I'll explain that. But that doesn't reflect democracy. At another time, given an opportunity, I'll explain what that means. And then, of course, there is the SAW issue, and I was really hoping to hear it from all the speakers. I think the closest person to it was Whitey Pollard. I was hoping to see if that meeting would have taken a more reconciliatory or conciliatory tone, because you cannot, and I urge you all, you cannot continue to describe those who are raising their hand to say, I'm angry, I'm upset, I'm disappointed, I'm vexed, and so, as troublemakers and nuisances. Because today you describe that one person, a family, when they go home and remember the family saw how hard they may have worked for you all, you know. When they go home and they express that to that family, that one just multiplied itself to 5. And if you do that to sufficient people and you keep multiplying, the number of dissent among you by now may be in the hundreds. And there have to be a way to diffuse it. And arrogance is not going to diffuse it. And I suspect that may have contributed to the attendance. But arrogance, so I expected the meeting to be one with a reconciliatory tone, a conciliatory tone, you know, not necessarily. You can't apologize for everything everybody say you do, especially if you didn't do it. Nobody asking you to do that. But you have to understand politics is a numbers game, you know. Politics is not loud truck and speakers and who could talk better than who and who presentation was. But that's not politics, you know. At the end of the day, that must quantify itself into a number so sufficient to give you victory, you know. And so now is no time to exclude and exile and banish. And I really was hoping that at least for the sake of magnanimity, that call for reconciliation and coming home and let us holding hands again together and making it work again together, you know. No, what them young people are saying, we are watching no face, just come home. Everybody, we know the issue. I know what you say about me, you know I say about you, but the time have come when we must just come home and embrace and hold hands together and work it out properly and move forward. I was hoping to hear that kind of tone from that meeting, and I didn't hear it. And that is when I realized, well, okay. But it's my advice that such a meeting, such a call need to start. Such a call need to start. So those are my thoughts on the meeting. That was the show for today. Thank you for staying with me. Thank you for your patience. I mean, I love you. I love you. And it's for love of country and love of Ireland why I do this thanklessly but dutifully every Wednesday. So may God bless you. Have a safe night. We will speak again sometime soon on much more issues as they arise.
The views and opinions expressed on the following program are those of the commentators, guest, and host. They do not explicitly or necessarily reflect nor represent the policy or the views held by Tobago Updates or this network. Tobago Updates or this network cannot be held accountable for all or any views expressed during this program.